All right, welcome to this extra special bonus episode. I've still got Richard Harcus here, and we're going to talk to you about conspiracy theories like I mentioned at the beginning of the previous episode. Now, the reason this came up is because, and we didn't mention this in the main part of the episode, but Richard is actually married to Dr. Lee Jones, who was previously on this podcast in the last episode. She's a scientist, and we talked a lot about, obviously, conspiracy theories with vaccines and things like this. And then that led to a bit of a conversation after that interview, after we stopped recording with Richard and with Lee. And we actually found out we have a shared, not passion, but we have a shared something, I don't know what you say, that we are actually both reformed conspiracy theorists. So if you haven't already, go check out, I did a podcast with The Comeback. I'll put the link in the notes. And I go into more detail with Connor Kelly on the Comeback podcast about how I used to be like so far down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. And now I've come out the complete other end where I almost don't believe in any conspiracy theory, even though some of them probably still are true, but let's not get into that. So I want to hear this. So when we just had this kind of brief chat that we realized we had a similar kind of take on life, explain to me and to our listeners, where were you at in terms of the conspiracy theory world, and how did you come out of it, and where are you now?
I would kind of, it's funny because I would say that I consider myself, or would have considered myself, quite deep down the rabbit hole. That said, some of my friends, or unfortunately former friends, have went even further down the rabbit hole, and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I can swear on this, but I'm like, oh shit, you can go deeper. Like, you could actually go deeper. Like, wow. Like, I thought I was as deep down the rabbit hole as you could possibly go. But no, some people have went even deeper. And I don't say that as a compliment. And I'm not as bragging either. There's the mentality in the way I thought then, and there's the mentality in the way I think now. Now, I know what many of my friends, and unfortunately, as I said, and I do mean unfortunately, ex-friends, think about me now, because I've been able to either climb out the rabbit hole or turn the rabbit hole into a tunnel, and I've come out the other end. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty down there. I was down there with Alice in Wonderland chasing rabbits. I was down there.
Well, so let's hear, because some people don't know, right? So I did that podcast, as I said, with Connor on the Comeback, and I mentioned to him about some people don't believe that cancer is real, or that they believe that cancer can be cured, and the big pharma are holding back the cure because there's more money to be made in treating people than curing cancer, which I didn't doubt that when I was down the rabbit hole and believed that. And I'm like, yeah, big pharma, blah, blah, blah. No basis in it, no scientific background, no knowledge in it. But I'm like, yeah, that must be true because it sounds true. But what I found interesting was when I just casually mentioned this to Connor, he was like, oh, I'd never heard of that before. Is that right? Did people believe that? And I was like, oh, shit, yes, some people haven't gone down that far, and some people have no idea the beliefs that are out there. So how far down did you go? And we can compare.
This is going to be fascinating. So the interesting thing is that some of the conspiracies that I heard actually helped me like get out of it, like snap out of it, like, this shit's crazy. Okay, so JFK could have been shot, there could have been a second gunman on the grass, that could have happened, right? Salvador Allende could have, that happened on 9/11, so that was a different date of 9/11 with Salvador Allende being overthrown, and the situation of there being smallpox in the blankets given to Native Americans, that stuff did happen. So like what you're saying is that there are conspiracies, there are conspiracies, and there will always be conspiracies, but it was the inability to separate and say, okay, so this is true, but this one isn't true. And I remember speaking to someone about landing on the moon, and he said, they never went to the moon, right? And the reason that they never went to the moon is because there's an alien base on the moon. So they never went to the moon, right? And I was like, right, okay. And he said, when you go to the moon, it was all done in a studio. And that's where the movie Capricorn 1 or Capricorn 5, whatever it was. That was where that movie came from, because it was to tell people, because it was it Stanley Kubrick or something that did that? And he actually helped them do the set. So this was his way of coming out to let people know. And you were like, okay, so that, I don't know. I'm not so sure. But while at the same time, you had people saying that, when they went to the moon, that this happened because of this guy got cancer, and you're like, but you just said they didn't go to the moon. And like, no, but if they did go to the moon, this. And I went, right, so you're contradicting yourself and you're tying yourself in knots, and I'm just sitting listening to you. And so I remember just beginning to think that, well, if you can say that about the moon, then I remember hearing people talking about conspiracies about stuff that I was really interested in, but things that I knew to be the exact opposite. And also, so like people today are obsessed with flat Earth and the Earth's flat and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. But you're like, even if that was a thing, that contradicts all the other conspiracies that you have believed before this about, the moon's not real, the moon's see-through, the moon's transparent, the moon, and if do you know they've actually already been to Mars? And when the other one, on their landing module, it's got a round window. So when you look at the round window, they were actually a lot closer to the Earth, because this is why the Earth looked round, because they switched all the lights off inside the lunar landing module. So you're seeing it being round from a distance, because they're holding the camera away from the window. So it's to make the Earth look small further in the distance, whereas they were a lot closer to the Earth, but you're just seeing the outline of the porthole on the side.
I've heard that one now you mention it. I remember that one.
And but you're the same people that say the Earth's flat, so why are you saying it's round? You're saying flat, but then you're saying it's flat and something else. Like, you're contradicting your own argument. And the best way for you to then realize that you might be believing a lot of nonsense, and it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing, but once you've done it, it's the most empowering thing. And the answer is, you know what? I might be wrong. I actually might not know as much about a subject as I think I do, because I know certainly for me, I grew up, and kind of, if I can for a second, I'll kind of go back into how I got into that situation. And I think it's very, very similar to a lot of situations for a lot of people. I kind of grew up in a time where you mistrusted the government. I grew up in Margaret Thatcher's Britain, where you didn't trust the Tories, you didn't trust the government, you didn't trust the police. No one was there to help you. Everything was being taken away from you. Margaret Thatcher was taking the milk off you. Then I kind of, I fell in love with like Public Enemy, who were saying, fight the power, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. Here's all the injustices. And then you found out about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and how people and Indigenous people around the world are treated, and how there's so many injustices in the world. Conspiracies, like I said, of putting smallpox in the blankets of the Native Americans, which is then very close to, but did you know the World Health Organization were spreading AIDS in Africa? Did you know that they put a virus in condoms to kill black people in Africa? And because you were already invested in these other conspiracies, that was kind of, it wasn't a large leap. It was a small baby step. And then what happens, each one became another baby step and another baby step and another baby step. So if you went to the beginning, you'd say that's quite a leap, but you kind of traveled along these things. Like Hugo Chavez was taken away from the Palace of Flowers, and when he came back, he died of cancer. So the government gave him cancer, and you're like, I don't know, that could have been possible. They could have blasted him with radiation, and he got. And it's it gets to the stage where like, but I don't know enough about cancer. I don't. Whereas I kind of forgot that you didn't know enough about a certain subject, but you're more than happy to make that jump. And what makes things worse is you're also surrounded by people that think exactly the same as you. So you have that confirmation bias of all the same people that are like, oh, so I read that Bob Marley died of cancer and he got cancer of the toe. And the reason he got rid of Bob Marley is because he was spreading this message. And it's the same reason why they shot Malcolm X. And it's the same reason why they shot. And you're like, so I know that the Fruits of Islam might have had something to do with killing Malcolm X. And I know that Martin Luther King was also shot. So it's not that much of a leap to believe that somebody gave Bob Marley cancer. And it's so much going on. And sadly, to kind of hold my hand up and say, like, there's a massive degree of paranoia, but there's also a large element of a lack of education that I wasn't prepared to admit that I don't know enough about a subject. So rather than sitting with someone who could say, the reason for this is this, and this is this, it's easier just to say, do you know what? You don't know, I do. You're a shill, or you're part of the problem. You're probably funded by the Masons, which are part of the Illuminati, which are, and if I was probably to sit back and listen to myself, I'd be like, what? I'm a nutcase.
That would be the same. And I said all the same things. So what was like, how deep, if you think of all the conspiracy theories? So to give you an example, I was so deep in it, I was down the straw man argument. So you know about the straw man argument and how we are all living under the law of the sea and we can all not contract with the government and...
this free man.
The free man, the movement. I was so deep into that. I was looking up laws. I was reading through like old law and everything like this. And one of the things, again, I was into it as well, because I was going to like marches or meetings with Aborigines in Australia when I lived there, and they were using a lot of these arguments to try and claim back Australia. So there was a lot of legal ease to it. They were trying to use a lot of this to say that, you know, Australia, the British government never legally took over Australia. And so things like this. So I was getting really deep into it, and there's still always a little part of me, like, you're never going to win because they've got all the power and the guns and all of that stuff. But there's a little part of me that's like, yeah, you know what? We are all turned into... So the thing that got me was the way my friend explained it to me, he was 10 times deeper than I was basically like, when it comes to money, where if you want to create money, right, and borrow money, you have to borrow it against something. There has to be a collateral. So for the government to borrow money for the whole country to run, they borrow it from the central bank, right? The central bank is a private bank. It's not owned by the government, whichever country it's in. It's a privately run bank. So they have to go to the bank. And then the collateral is essentially the citizen's ability to pay tax in the future, which is then why, especially in America, they're so crazy about collecting tax. They assign you a social security number the moment you're born. And so that to me makes a lot of sense that we are all chattel. We are all indentured slaves that will have to pay tax for the rest of our life to pay back the money that the government has borrowed. I'm not a lawyer now, never been a lawyer. So I don't know how much that makes sense. I got deep into it. It seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And it seemed to make a lot of sense that you should be able to choose not to contract with these entities, which have all been created and all kind of started from British law and then spread across the world. So I was so far deep into that. Like that's probably at the bottom for me. But everything I was into, the fake moon landing. I'll go on.
I was going to say I think it's called the free citizen or free man, depending where you are in the world. It's got slightly different names. And it came under the maritime law. I remember hearing that. That's why when you're born, it's called a birth. And that's why when ships are put into the water, it's a birth. And it comes under maritime law. And that's why it's a birth canal, because it's
there's a lot of words. It's like currency and passport and airport. Like there's a lot of maritime laws.
Yeah. But the thing is, ultimately at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. So what I'm doing is I'm filling in gaps of my lack of knowledge to confirm my own ignorance of a subject. Whereas if somebody who's to come in who is a lawyer or somebody that works in the finance industry and says, well, the reason that it's called this is this, the reason that it's called this is that. Like, I remember hearing different terms and saying, oh, this word comes from this. But it didn't come from that. It was just purely me not understanding the meaning of a word. You know, like Scotch mist. And Scotch is always a term when I go, oh, but it means Scots because of Scottish and the way that Scottish people were enslaved and et cetera, et cetera. But you're like, well, no, Scotch is separating two things like butterscotch and hopscotch. Scotch has got nothing like a Scotch egg, you know, for want of a better explanation. Whereas every time someone was Scotch, I was like, oh, this is a way of trying to break down Scottish people, whether it was getting away with something Scot-free, which I know is not Scot, but I always thought that getting away with something Scot-free was because when you bought two African slaves, then a Scottish person, you would get a Scottish person for free. And why would I not believe that? Because everything else is against the Scottish and the Irish. And if you look at the Scottish and the Irish and the way that we were taken around the world, that we were slaves. And it was also like, I want to be part of being a slave too, because it's not fair that only the Africans get to be slaves. And I want people to feel sorry for me as well. And do you know what I mean? And it was like, some of the things you are privileged about, some of the things that you're not so privileged about, some people have had it worse than you, and some people will have it worse than you in the future. And from that point of view, it was kind of a bit of an awakening for me as well, because I'm like, I'm not as downtrodden and downbeaten as I would like to be, which is a ridiculous situation to be in, because it was like, almost like you invented monsters because there wasn't enough monsters around. So, like, there are real bad people in this world, but what's the need to invent new monsters when you could actually be doing something in real life? You know, like, I support the people of Palestine, for example. I think a lot of the things that happened in the Balfour Declaration after the Second World War are wrong. There's no conspiracy in that. That's all true. That's all documented. That all happened. But when you start creating monsters around these situations to make a situation worse, then you dilute and you discredit the bad things that have already happened. But that doesn't make you look really smart in the pub. You think it's someone who, let's be honest, they might have worked in political affairs, but they've got a degree or a master's degree in the subject that you know very little about. But it's great for you to come up with something that they've never heard of, so that you can sound just as smart as them. When in reality, you've done 3 hours on the internet and they've done 3 years at university plus. I'm going off on a tangent here, but here's one for you. Since you bring up maritime law and stuff like that, have you ever heard of the mud flood? This one's brilliant.
No, that's
mud
a new
flood.
one. No, go on.
So I am such a reformed conspiracy theorist that I enjoy new conspiracy theories purely so I can laugh at the absolute ridiculousness of it. Now, I appreciate that laughing at them is not the best way to get people to come back to reality. However, it's not my job to bring people back. I watch I watch the Creaky Blinder on YouTube a lot, and I like what he says when he said, "Oh, I'm not here to convert people back to normality. I'm here just to poke a stick at them and laugh." And I'm like, yeah, totally. And I watch Dusty Smith as well. And I watch a lot of these anti-conspiracy things because they're hilarious. And the mud flood is people genuinely, but this is brilliant, by the way, strap yourselves in. People genuinely believed that there was a massive flood of mud around the world that covered over generation of people before, and they back this up with, oh, do you see the windows at the bottom of houses? And you're like, what, a basement window? And they went, no, those used to be big windows, but the mud came that high. And you're like, you don't have any qualifications in architecture, so you don't know how a building is built. And on top of that, they use pictures of buildings being very high up, but they're being at the bottom, like a very deep trench. Now, those pictures are pictures of undergrounds being dug around the world. That's all that is. But you're like, there's houses up here and they're way down here. And that's because of a mud flood. And you're like, no, it's because they're digging things for undergrounds and subway channels and stuff like that. Like, it's nothing to do with a mud flood. They look at...
I'll just Google it. It's fucking mental. I'm gonna read more of that. But this was how I felt.
We'll be right back.
Join pilot and adventurer Fernando Pino as he takes you on journeys to discover exciting destinations across the UK and Europe. You'll fly with him to hidden gems and experience local culture, from bustling streets to serene hideaways and the best places to eat, sleep, and play. Travel Plans is more than a podcast. It's your ticket to exploring the world and its history with a friend. In this episode, we are flying to discover a beachside paradise perfect for the whole family. Discover golden sands, activities galore, and even free childcare so you get your own break too. Why am I still here?
This was how I felt when I first heard the flat earth theory. When I first heard that, I was already kind of came out the rabbit hole. And I thought it was a joke. I remember the first time I saw something come up about it, about somebody tweeted or put on Instagram, something about the flat earth. And I was like, haha, who's this crazy person believes in the flat earth? And I never thought about it or saw anything about it again for weeks or months. And then I saw it come up again and I read it and I was like, oh shit, this is a real thing. People think the earth is flat. Like, what the fuck is going? Like, I thought some of the shit I believed in, like I said, some of it I'm still like, oh, maybe I don't know if it's true. But that one, I'm like, you've gone too far if you think that the earth is flat. And then I watched this video on YouTube where it was like 3 flat earthers against 3 like astrophysicists. And these flat earthers were like a water salesman, like a housewife, something else. And they were saying with all the confidence in the world that these astrophysicists were wrong. And similar thing what you were saying, they were saying like, oh, the pictures from NASA are all doctored and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, you've gone too far, man. Like this, like you said as well, there are some conspiracy theories that you can have some weight. JFK, I don't know much about it, but you can definitely say there's something fishy there or whatever it is you want to say. There's those conspiracy theories that have come true. And the thing that got me the most was last year, one of my friends posted this like hierarchy. And at the bottom was things that we know are true. So it was like the MK Ultra tests by the CIA, they were true. I don't think the smallpox was on there, but that definitely was like a true thing. Then there was things that you can question, which was like JFK. I can't remember some other things. Then there was things was like leaving reality. And that was, I can't even remember now, but and then it was like left reality. Now the pinnacle was like, you've left like all reality, whereas things like lizard people, and which I was into for a short time as well. There was one as well that Finland isn't real. Have you heard about this conspiracy theory that Finland isn't a real country?
I know that Australia is not real, honestly. So yeah, but what gets me is like, if you are a conspiracy theorist that lives in Australia, where do you live? Because some of their friends don't think Australia exists, and they believe that Australia is filmed in a TV studio. So what happens to the conspiracy theorists that live in Australia?
I haven't heard that
It's
one.
similar to, if you go on to some of the flat earth websites, which I don't advise you to do, but some of them would celebrate having members all around the world. I'm like, what? How do you have members all around the globe? How is that? And I mean, to kind of go back to what you're saying as well, that there's a lot of stuff that is true. So in 1776, Adam Weishaupt set up the Illuminati in the Bavarian Alps in Germany, right? So the Illuminati existed. The Illuminati were then broken up after that, and not long after that.
I forgot about the
1770
Illuminati. I was so into that, like so into the Illuminati.
Everybody moves on from that because you go, okay, so we've got the Knights Templar, who were the first people to create a banking system, but they weren't really, but then we'll say that they were because it fits the narrative of the story that we're telling. And that was done during the time of the Crusades. And the reason why they did that was if they wanted to go from the Holy Land, from the UK to the Holy Land or anywhere in Christendom, rather than you carrying it on the trail, you could collect the money and then we would drop the money off. We would hand something over. We would kind of have an insurance policy and stuff. And then what happened? King Philippe of France and Pope Pius II, I think it was, then thought that they, and this is documented. This is okay. This isn't conspiracy, but then they believed that the Knights Templar were getting a little bit too powerful because they were making all this money from this insurance stuff. But then what happens is the Knights Templar then turned into, these were the defenders of the Illuminati. And you're like, no. Now, what's interesting in this, again, is where Scotland comes into it, which is where it fed into my ego and it fed into me wanting to know stuff. Because Scotland was the ends of the earth, which was literally just because it was the ends of the Roman Empire. So therefore, this is why you have Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and this is why you have all the connection from Scotland and the Masons. So it kind of fed into my ego. And then when you see Robert the Bruce and the paintings of Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn, he's flanked by 2 Knights Templar. And so therefore but Robert the Bruce was actually Robert the Bruce from a French family, etc., which is why there was the Knights Templar, but they were advising him, but they were separate and they weren't mercenaries, but they were disconnected from any one country. Now, because they were too powerful, they were then disbanded. And then whether you think that they prayed to a head of John the Baptist, etc., but this is always used in these Illuminati things of the Masons are controlling this. And now, fast forward to Scottish modern day, if you're brought up as a Catholic in Scotland, you already distrust the Masons because the Masons are Protestants. There's Masonic lodges connected to football clubs, and the football clubs are protected because they look after the referees, and certain football teams win because of this. And so it all kind of feeds into something that's tangible and real to you. But the reality is the history doesn't match up, and you're looking for demons and monsters that are there. Now, do those organizations exist? Yes. Are they as powerful as you think they are? No. Because if you've ever been to a coffee morning at a Masonic lodge, like, they barely remember the price of a cupcake. So they're not going to be running the world. I've been to Masonic lodges where they pull the curtains over and not because there's windows, but because there's all these symbols and stuff on the wall, and you're not supposed to look at the stuff on the wall. It's just children like grown-ups acting like children, thinking they have all these secret stuff and they know this secret information. Whereas in reality, it's just a bunch of guys who want to give another guy a hand up. So if you're in this club and you go for this job that will help you, and yes, at one stage it would have been powerful, and it's not as powerful as it used to be. The world's moved on. Some of these people can't move on, but also these people perpetuating these conspiracy theories, they also can't move on. Although many of them have went, like the ones that thought that COVID was like a pandemic, they've forgotten about that and they've moved on to, oh, there's a war in Ukraine and that's not even real. There's body bags and it's not even real. And these, honestly, I apologize to your listeners. I could go on all day.
No, that's okay.
Since it is listening to
this is why I've separated this from the main podcast. I can't believe in all my conspiratorial thinkings. I forgot about the Illuminati. That's kind of where it all started. Was finding out about that but I got really big into symbolism, and it's something I just kind of shut out my mind because I do think there is a lot of dodgy shit, and a lot of it is in music. And I got really into like following a website called Vigilant Citizen, which is still out there, and it exposes all the symbolism in music. And there is a lot of it by a lot of the big artists where you're like, man, there's too many coincidences that you're all doing these same symbols. Like one of my favorite bands, do you know Cage the Elephant?
No.
So Cage the Elephant, band from America, fucking awesome indie rock band, right? And then they came out with this song, Doctor, I can't remember the name of it, Doctor, I think it's called. And I watched the music video and I nearly threw up because I was like, fuck me, man, this thing, like, it's so full of like either Masonic or Illuminati symbolism, whatever you want to call it, but like chock full of it. Like, and I can recognize it because I know I've read so much about all of this, and I'm like, that's that. And that made me really dislike them. I was like, there's something here in this music industry. Why is there so much symbolism? And then Queens of the Stone Age brought out an album, a song, and again, I can't remember the name, but you can go watch it on YouTube. The symbolism in it is unreal. It's like unreal. It's like a woman on an altar being sacrificed. It's black and white tiles on the floor. It's like him playing a demonic character. And it's just like, what the fuck is this? This is just too weird. But anyway, I get distracted. I'm going on a tangent. The point I wanted to make though is I got really into
I mean, yeah, I was going to say I'm 100, but before you kind of move on from that, if you look at Madonna with this famous picture with a pyramid on the back of her jacket, and then you look at Jay-Z, and then you look at all of them
Jay-Z
doing the all
they always covering that.
The thing is, when Jay-Z was doing it like for the diamond or whatever it is, but we can't trust that because the narrative. But a lot of these musicians and film stars and stuff are purely doing it because they know that they'll get spoken about through doing that. I'm a big fan of Rick Ross, and Rick Ross pretends all the time. He talks about the Masons and then he laughs, and then he name checks some of his friends that are down the rabbit hole. And he said, I only put that in because now and it's almost like I'm not allowed to be famous and make money. And the only reason I've made this money is because I'm in the Masons, not because I'm a talented person. People need to, it's not so much check your privilege, but people turn around and say, well, Beyonce and Jay-Z are only where they are because they're in the Masons. And you're like, so not because they've worked really, really hard to get to where they want to be. Now, I understand when you talk about symbolism, because I remember looking Alfa Romeo, looking at car badges and stuff like that. I was very similar to you, that I could see a swastika. If I looked at anything long enough, I could find a swastika in it. If I looked at car badges, like Volkswagen, you could say, right, okay, so there's 3 of the V's on there. So that's the 3 learned degrees of the that's the learned degrees of the Masonic Lodge. And the 3 V's are pyramids. So therefore that's a symbol to tell the other Masons. And if you look at Alfa Romeo, and Berlusconi has an Alfa Romeo like flower thing in his front garden, like a flower bed, and it's the snake eating a human, which shows that there's a reptilian agenda and black. You can stare at that stuff long enough and make any story you want out of it to fit the narrative, if you're aware of that narrative. But you're bang on as well at the same time that when you've said that you're so deep down the rabbit hole that you see things everywhere, it's the same as if you're staring at a piece of wood and you look at the knots in the wood. If you're a fundamental Christian person, you'll see Mother Teresa in a burnt piece of toast, or you'll see Mary's face, on a bit of wood. It's how you begin to then train your brain to see stuff. And I'm trying to remember what it's called. Pareidolia. Pareidolia is, to see things that are there. But that is in our brain, and it's there to protect us from back in the day, so as that we see things in the distance, that we can see things that might be a threat to us. And it's similar to, like, again, before I guarantee you, I've never spoke to you about this, but I guarantee you, before you got into conspiracies, you were interested in UFOs and ghosts. Because that's what happens to you. No?
Maybe UFOs, but not anything deeper than, like, I've heard of Roswell and read a little about it. I never believed in ghosts. So yeah, no, actually, no. But interesting point. But UFOs made me wonder. But the thing you're saying about, though, I do think when you see this symbolism, like, I think there is a difference. I know what you mean, though. Like, if you believe in Christianity, you see bloody Mother Teresa in a wet tea towel and things like this. But that's kind of by chance, whereas a lot of these symbols, these Alfa Romeo, for example, or whatever it is, they've all been created by a person, and they've all been created. Like, you think about anything you create, you do not create it by mistake or by accident. You think about what you're creating, right? So somebody thought of that and put it in there. So I'm making myself sound like I'm not a reformed conspiracy theorist. To be honest, I've just walked away from it because it's too much to think of, but it's just bringing it back to me. Like, I do think there's a lot of shit out there. But to go back to the Masons, so that was one that got me. Masons rule the world, Illuminati, the whole thing with the banking pillars. Like, every bank has the same pillars and they have a lot of Masonic symbolism.
7 pillars with 5 gaps between, and the 5 gaps between, which actually goes back to a Greek, I believe it was a Greek architectural design.
Right.
It was nothing to do with the banks. It was more of a facade. But then, if you look up what the word facade means, then the clues are in word. And, oh, Jesus.
But we'll wait to hear this. So I actually joined the Masons when I lived in Australia, but not because I was trying to infiltrate them. It was because I lived. yeah. Well, that was part of it. No. Do you know what it was? I lived in Australia, and I didn't have many guy friends. And just like, even at our age, I'm only a few years younger than you. And this was like 10 years ago. Even 10 years ago, it's difficult to make friends with guys. You know, you don't walk up to a guy in a bar and be like, all right, mate, how you doing? You want to have a drink? You know, I mean, I wouldn't even do that to a female, but it's even harder to make guy friends. And the older you get, it's even more difficult, I guess, once everyone starts pairing up. So that's why we all get married, right? Just so we can have a friend, isn't it? But I was in that age in my late 20s, and I had a girlfriend at the time, but I didn't have any guy friends. And I think this was before I went down the rabbit hole, so I wasn't really conspiratorial at the time. And I thought the Mason seems like a good thing. You know, you get to meet a whole bunch of guys. And I absolutely fucking loved that. I've got friends that I'm still friends with today from that. And it does make me think there is just no way, like you said, the Masons could rule the world. There was a bunch of old guys. Most of them are fucking dying. They all hang out once a week with a glass of wine. It's a dying organization.
Cheap wine.
Yeah, a cheap wine. It's not like you walk in and they're all like, I thought they were all going to be super rich. They all just had normal jobs. But do you know the reason I left though, right? So this is what they do. You have to stay like an oath, and you come in so you hang out and you have dinner and stuff, and you drink a glass of wine and whatnot, and you all chat, and it's super, super friendly. You know, that's the whole point, brotherhood and everything. But then you go into the kind of temple, right? Which is where you see all this kind of stuff, that you see all these symbols, and there's the floors laid out in a certain way, and there's all these kind of like statues and plinths and all of this, and everyone's got like stuff. So you have to learn this oath, and you learn it, and then you go through all this ceremonial stuff, and it's all, you have to stand a certain way, and this is how they say that they can like put themselves to judges, because after I joined the Masons, I could spot a fellow Mason in an instant. You could just see the way they held themselves, the way they stood, or the way they did something. And then you'd kind of have a wee word with them, and you'd be like, are you a Freemason? Or you'd ask them a couple of questions, because you learn all these, you do learn like secret questions. Like, I can't even remember them now, it was so long ago.
A handshake on the knuckles and all
Little
that.
handshakes on the knuckles, things like that. Yeah, and there's a couple of things you can ask. I can't even remember now. But anyway, so I get in, and you say the oath that you've remembered, but then they say, okay, now repeat after me. And that's where it started to get a little bit dark. And as you go up, and then I went and researched it, because, you know, you can find all this shit out on the internet these days. As you go higher, it gets even fucking darker. So that's when it gets to the point where I think even maybe the oath I said was like, I will tear out my stomach rather than like betray a fellow brother, things like this. But I didn't know I was going to be saying that. I just learned like these first 4 lines, which was all about the sun and the moon and things like this. But then suddenly I was doing this like repeat after me shit. And then I was like, hold on a minute. And then I looked into it, and I was like, I'm not fucking going up on that. I only did it once. I only did the first degree masonry. Because once I read it, I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that again. And then he's going to say, repeat after me. And then I have to keep going like darker and darker. So I don't know. And I think I read as well, you know, whatever, I'm not spiritual really at all, but there is something spiritual about saying an oath and saying something in a kind of sacred manner that if I do this, I'm going to like fucking rip out my stomach. So I was like, I'm not going down that path. So at the same time, it's kind of weird. There's loads of symbolism. It's definitely kind of occultish, but at the same time, it's just a bunch of old dudes in black tuxedos all hanging out and helping each other in a really cool brotherhood.
But again, at the same time, it's okay to be in a club. It doesn't necessarily mean to say it's that it's a demonic setup. I mean, because you use the word occult there, and occult just means hidden. So they are hidden. So it is a cult. It doesn't. So for me, as someone who was brought up a Catholic, who is now an atheist, I don't believe in God. So it's always funny to me when religious people will say, "Oh, so you praise Satan?" I'm like, no, I don't believe in God. Therefore, I don't believe in the devil. There's no such thing as demons. There's no such thing as Santa. There's no such thing as a tooth fairy. There's a lot more dangerous things in the world than the made-up sky daddy and all this stuff. And to go back to the flat Earth for a second as well, a lot of the people that believe in the flat Earth take stuff from the Bible. So a lot of these people are people that have either now. I'm not for a minute going to stand up for the Bible because I think it's one of the most abhorrent books that you could ever read. But what I will say is some of these people have taken bits from the Bible that they've completely misunderstood, or they've bent it to fit their own agenda as well. Their misunderstanding of the filament, and which is, that's the dome over the earth. Like, no, that's not what that means. It's the same as when people look at the Torah, same as when people look at the Quran and the Hadith. They take these different things because that's what religious people do, and they fix it and they change it and they mold it to fit their narrative. And that's no different to what conspiracy theorists do. And I don't think that there's any stronger belief than conspiracy theories. I think they're worse than religious people, like negative religious people, because I'm not saying all people that are religious are bad. I think they're misdirected, but that's my own personal opinion on that. I think there's many good, decent religious people out there that try to do the right thing. I just don't understand why they have to have an invisible sky daddy to be a nice person. You can be a nice person and have morals without religion. Many of these conspiracies are based on demons, or that's why I made a reference to ghosts as well, because it's connected to the devil and God. And when you're mentioning the stuff about the Freemasons and the Scottish Rite Freemasons. And then, of course, then you talk about the Skull and Bone Society and Yale University and all the ceremonies that they do. And it's about, the Bible and quoting this part of the Bible and the goat's head. But, actually, the Baphomet is actually, the Masons are actually Satan worshippers. They don't, because obviously, with the Masonic ring, and it's about one God, and the God is they say it's Mercury, which is a fallen star, but the fallen star is actually Lucifer. And you're like, again, it's twisting words to fit the narrative. They call it the star, but the star is actually not a star because it's Mercury. And you're like, well, that's why there's Mercury in hell. And you're like, you're just moving stuff around, to fix your narrative. And it's full of it. And while there are stuff that is a mystery, I'm pretty sure that if you were to investigate it, but I mean, really investigate it, like the one that gets me a lot is when people say, and I got this more from my wife than from myself. And again, it's okay to say that I got this from someone else. I didn't come to the conclusion myself. That empowers you. Saying I don't know it empowers you. But yeah, when you hear people now, it doesn't matter if it's dinosaurs didn't exist. It doesn't matter if it's
one as well.
It doesn't matter which one it is. People turn around and go, I've done my research. Now, you need to go to university to learn how to do research. Like, research isn't just going onto YouTube and watching something that confirms the narrative that you believe in the first place. Doing your research isn't sitting in the pub or sitting with your mates, having a joint, chatting about a Ouija board and ghosts. That's not doing your research. Doing your research is more, and obviously I'm not an expert on doing research, but looking at all the available options, looking at the things that that you might agree with, that you might not agree with. Look to see who backs it up. Look to see what qualified person has backed stuff up, whether that's peer-reviewed stuff or whatever. I mean, I don't know all the correct terms for it, but that's the most important thing. I don't know, but I'm not pretending that I do know. So is that the paranoia of I might look stupid. The reality is the more conspiracy theories that you talk about, the more stupid you make yourself look. So if your number one thing is to not look stupid by saying, I know everything. Like when somebody, perfect example, you mentioned that band to me, right? And you said, have you heard of them? Years ago, I would have said yes, because I don't want you to think I'm stupid. Whereas now I say no, because I don't know them. But here's an extra thing. They obviously weren't promoted well enough by the Illuminati because I've never heard of them. So clearly weren't. Do you know what I mean? And it's people saying people that say do your research, they need to learn what that actually means before they even do their research.
Yeah. Well, that one, I mean, so as you mentioned with Lee being a scientist and being a vaccine advocate, she held that a lot and sees that a lot. I've done my own research and we've all seen it. And it is quite funny because like you mentioned, so I studied sports science and we did physiology and biology and chemistry and physics and all of this stuff. And you also have to do statistics because when you find a result, you then have to do this crazy fucking weird statistical analysis, which there's about 4 different Russian names for each one of them. And you have to choose the one that fits your scientific experiment the best. You do a whole course just on statistics. And I remember thinking, why the fuck am I doing statistics if I studied sports science? But it's like, but it's because it's your first year and you've got to learn how to do the statistics before you do the experiment, because you've got to be able to prove that your experiment is statistically valid. So just because you get a set of results, you can't be like, yep, I found. So anyway, that's just how complicated research is. So for someone to then go, I've done my own research. And then you've just made me think as well, even in terms of if you're not a scientist, right, and you don't understand that, you can be an investigative journalist, but that means that you will be spending weeks and months, maybe even years on the one case, learning every in and out, every side of it. You would never publish it unless you had made sure you'd covered all your bases. Like that's doing your own research. So you don't have to be a scientist, but you got to be an investigative journalist with a good backing. You can't just say you've watched a few YouTube videos and done your own research. But that's what I used to do. But anyway, look, we could obviously go on all night. So let's move on. Tell me, how did you then... So we're obviously on the same page that we understand. So the thing I guess we haven't talked, and let me just give my take on it. I'm pretty sure you feel the same as well. The reason that I understand why we look to conspiracies so much is because, one, what you said right in the beginning, okay, so even you're going all the way back to Thatcher, even if you don't go as far back as that, over the years, we've lost all trust in the government because they've gone to war in Iraq. When I remember being... What year was that? Like 2000, 98, 99, 2000? When did we go to war in Iraq? I remember being mass protests worldwide. The second one, like in the Tony Blair one. I remember there being mass protests across the UK. There was meant to be Hans Blix, the weapons inspector, who said they don't have weapons of mass destruction, don't go to war. Everyone in the UK is like, don't go to war. And they went to fucking war. And then, of course, it comes out that they didn't have weapons of mass destruction and they sexified the thing. So that to me is a big standout moment in my life where you completely lost trust in the government. Obviously, I was a bit younger in the Thatcher years. I was born in 82, but I obviously know of them. Which I was going to say, by the way, also fed into the narrative of 9/11 was an inside job created for us to go into Iraq and Afghanistan, etc., etc. Yeah. So that was connected to that, which fed that paranoia and fed that conspiracy theory. And now, I mean, I was in the last kind of generation that didn't pay for my university education. So university education gets more and more expensive. Workers' rights are less and less. We're less protected in the environment. So, like, I don't want to go on, but there's just, I mean, we've just been fucked over as human beings for 30, 40 years now. So we've lost all trust in all major institutions, big pharma and things like that, like I mentioned in the beginning. So when you start to lose trust in these major institutions, you lose trust in everything. And then you look, like you mentioned as well, we need to find a narrative. We need to make understanding of this crazy, crazy world that we live in. We're now more connected than we've ever been. You used to only see your neighbors, and now we're connected to some guy in fucking Timbuktu. So we've now suddenly got this massively hyper-connected world. We're trying to make sense of every crazy incident. I mean, before, if there was some sort of plane crash or building collapsed on the other side of the world, we wouldn't hear about it for a week, but now we like watch it happen. So we see all this craziness. So
Can I just jump in for a second though? And I mean this also with the deepest of respect, that you're saying that, things have been terrible for us for the last 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. But we're also one of the most privileged people that have ever lived on this planet, because we have medicine that makes us live longer. We have better diet in many of the countries. We don't send children up chimneys. We're living longer. We're having good lives. So it's almost like, and again, I'm not saying specifically you, but every single generation seems to think that they've got it hard. Whereas the reality is, like, we're not being sent to war. We're not being conscripted to go to war like in the First World War. And we're not getting stuck in the Crimean War fighting in the Battle of Balaclava where nobody cares. We have a healthcare system that looks after us, whether that's properly funded or not. We don't have children. I mean, we do in some scenarios with children where the heat can't get put on, but we have a welfare state. We have a system, we are probably the most better off. But it comes back to what I said earlier on. You still want to feel that you're hard done by. And here's all the reasons why we're hard done by. So here's all the conspiracy me feel hard done by. Back in the day when folks were getting stuck up chimneys, they didn't have time for conspiracy theories because they were too busy getting on with stuff. And they're too trying to survive. And I think if you look at lower income countries, they also don't have time for conspiracy theories because they're too busy to actually survive in the world that they live in. If you have enough time for conspiracy theories, then you should consider yourself a really fortunate person. A really fortunate person.
You got way too much time on your hands. No, I will take that. I will admit that. You're right. It's from a very sheltered viewpoint that everything's got better, because I'm going to contradict myself here, because for people who are massive anti-capitalism, and capitalism is the worst thing in the world, and there are many, many negative points of capitalism, but in the last 30, 40, 50 years of rampant capitalism, we've pulled more people out of poverty worldwide at a greater rate than we ever have at any time in history. We have more millionaires, like, even though we've got more billionaires, but let's forget about them. We've got more millionaires every year. I can't think in America, there's a crazy amount of new millionaires. So life is better. I know, and you're right, when you look about like healthcare and all this stuff, I guess I'm thinking more about like environmental degradation. Everything costs more, but I guess it's been like that for everyone. But whether I'm obviously wrong on that, but that's the perception for the generation. But my main point is, though, we lose trust. As soon as we started to lose trust in institutions that we used to trust that we would have a job for 30 years. We used to trust that the government would provide for us. We used to trust that universities would, I don't know, whatever. So anyway, my point is that when we lost all that trust, which has been eroded, people need to find narratives. And then the internet came along and anyone could post anything that they wanted. And then suddenly from there, we've had the birth of conspiracy theories, which went from JFK to flat Earth in 40 years or 50 years.
And mud flood.
And mud flood. I've got it up on the computer. I'm going to go read that when we're done. That's a fucking new one. As soon as I'm finished, I'm going to be like, AJ, we need to talk about mud floods. So just to wrap up as well. So you saw my post today. Anyone who is friends with me on social media will have seen my post. I had a old friend who I was friends with 10 years ago back in Melbourne. And we were really close. We were down the rabbit hole together, but he was even further down. He was much more spiritual than me, than I ever was. He was way into like his spirituality, but we were way down the rabbit hole together. Then we moved on with our lives. We moved to separate places. There was no animosity or anything like that. I came out of the rabbit hole and we never really talked much. He posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, or it came up on LinkedIn that he had a new job.
Well, just LinkedIn, not even Facebook.
No,
or
not even friends with him on Facebook. Yeah,
wow.
And I barely even use LinkedIn, but I went on, and it came up as a notification that he'd got a new job. So I messaged him saying congratulations. It was like kind of one of those automatic things, so I just pressed it, send congratulations, and then he messaged me back, and let me just read it because I'll forget how it went. Yeah, so he messaged me back saying, I'm great. The scamdemic has actually helped business. I don't even know what his business is. How's the stand-up or has the podcast replaced that? So I didn't even address his questions. I was like, you actually believe it's a scamdemic? I believe it is, yes. I said, I came out of that rabbit hole a long time ago. What evidence have you got? Simple question. Typical, and I know, and I've had conversations with conspiracy theories, this is always a response. They will not even counter it. They just change the conversation. So his response was, oh, geez, Neil, this feels like deja vu. You're not going to change my beliefs. So let's be clear, beliefs, not evidence. I'm not going to change your beliefs. Might not beliefs, might not evidence-based opinion. Let's agree to disagree. So fine, I just left it. I said, no worries. No, because I couldn't be bothered getting into it. I
agree.
Then yesterday morning, out of nowhere, I got a message from him. No, this was out of nowhere. Looks like your pandemic has mysteriously disappeared. Funny that. The fear-mongering mainstream media has found another enemy for us to hate. Now, before I could even process what he was saying, and that obviously the pandemic has not disappeared, we have one of our best friends has literally just escaped from Ukraine yesterday and has made it to Poland. We've been talking to her every day. It's been one of the most horrible 2 weeks of my life, seeing our friend in a war zone and all the things that come with that. So as I realized, I hadn't processed yet that what he meant was the fear-mongering mainstream media has found another enemy. And I think you mentioned it, saying about people think that this war is fake, which again is so either American-centric or Eurocentric that they think these wars are made to distract them. I remember there was something in Europe happened. I think it was COVID. Something with COVID happened in Europe, and there was a senator in the US said it was like a distraction for the midterm elections. And I was like, mate, no one in Europe gives a fuck about the midterm elections. Like, anyway, getting distracted. So before I realized he was talking about Ukraine, I put his quote back to him, let's agree to disagree, whereas he's just come to me with this like pandemic shit. And I said, had COVID last week, wonder what it really was then, if it was a scamdemic. I should ask all my relatives in the medical field, which I have many. Shout out to my sister, my cousins, everyone else I know, and scientist friends, your wife, what it really was. I'll let them know that you know the answer. And I put my phone away. I got my phone back out and I was about to fucking unleash on him because I realized as I put my phone away, I was like, he's talking about Russia and that Russia's fake. And our fucking friend is escaping bombs right now. And I was about to be like, go fuck yourself. Like I got so angry. And as I went to type it, it said at the bottom, LinkedIn member, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. LinkedIn member has blocked you from receiving messages, or LinkedIn member can unable to receive your messages. And I was like, fuck you, man. You just jumped into my DMs, pulling up your scamdemic shit, and then you disappear. And I was like, this is typical fucking conspiracy theory behavior that like can't answer your questions about evidence, makes up bullshit, and then runs away at the first sign of being questioned.
Yeah. And I think for me, ironically going off on a tangent and down a rabbit hole, what you were kind of alluding to in the question is to how did I move away from that?
Yeah, and sorry, that was my question.
but the answer's simple and yet not simple at the same time. It's more difficult to do, but the answer is speak to people. Speak to people openly, because this is always the one that makes me laugh. They say, you're so close-minded, you'll believe anything. You're like, no, you're the one being closed-minded, which isn't going to win you any arguments, but you'll believe anything. You're like, no, you're the one that believes in a fucking mud flood. You're the one that'll believe anything. But
the mud flood.
Speak to people outside your echo chamber. Speak to people who are actually experts in it. Listen to what they've got to say. Travel, see the world. Try to take it from other people's point of views. You know, when you talk about COVID, how has that affected people in countries that don't have a healthcare system that's reacted in the same? And you're 100% correct. When people talk about COVID and COVID being finished and COVID being over now, and you're like, but it's not other countries. You selfish, privileged, lucky shit that you are, that it's okay for you. I was speaking to friends in England the other day, and they were saying, oh yeah, because like this COVID thing's over, nobody's wearing masks anymore. And you're like, well, there's still people dying. But also, there's other people not dying, but the reason they're not dying is because they took the vaccine and because the vaccine works. Now, also, again, we could talk forever about this, and it's not my area of expertise. But what I can tell you is I had COVID, and my friend Stephen was the guy that was the first guy that got it in Ho Chi Minh City, or maybe in Vietnam. I don't really remember. I remember the text messages from him, and like, thank goodness he survived. But I know what it did to him.
With the pilot?
And I remember, yeah, the pilot. Yeah,
You're
Scottish guy,
with
friend of
the Motherwell fan.
Yeah.
Holy shit, right?
Do you know, on a side story, do you know what makes it really funny? I was WhatsApping him, asking him if he was all right, because I heard about it. And he said, well, it's all right. I've saw on the news that there's an English guy that's been taken into the hospital as well. I was like, no, mate, that's you. Because he's Scottish. He thought there was another pilot that was English. I was like, no, but you were reporting about it.
Vietnamese don't know Scottish. I say all the time, I say I'm Scottish, or even filling in a form and there's no option. It's just English. I'll say I'm from Scotland. They go, oh, and you're like, no, it's not.
Same. But at the same time, I say, so China, Vietnam, same. And they go,
Yeah.
So once you say it, I understand. But to go back to what I'm saying, I remember his situation. Now, I also, because of my wife, know many horrible stories and people who are absolute heroes. And for these horrible people to be then saying it's not a thing, or not understand the sacrifices that people have put through. I don't know if you ever saw the video of the old woman leaving her husband at the side of the road, and the people in the hazmat suits lifting the guy into the truck. And I'm going to call it how it is. These absolute scumbags saying that this was made up and it didn't even exist because it's something that's trying to take your attention away from the midterm elections or whatever in America. Like, you are so wrapped up in your own paranoia. See these people, the Freedom Convoy. How embarrassed must they feel when they're saying they're on a freedom convoy for freedom? Meanwhile, you got people in humanitarian corridors being fed into Belarus and Russia rather than going into Poland and stuff like that. There's some real people. There's a real humanitarian crisis. Yet you're a privileged shit sitting in a truck driving through America without a worry in the world because you're on a freedom convoy.
Yeah, it's mental.
You know, without, even though it sounds like I'm on my soapbox, let me say this and make it kind of very clear as well. These people are not freedom fighters. These people are not on a quest. These people are not ordained by God. These people are paranoid nutcases with nothing better to do with their time than kid on there's some quasi Che Guevara that's here to save the world. And unfortunately, most of them carry religion with it to say that they're like Jesus on a crusade or some utter nonsense. If you were truly a religious person, truly and as I said, I'm not a fan of any religion, but if you truly wanted to live by the morals that you're pretending to live by, then actually start caring about other people instead of being this person that is inward looking and selfish and all the rest of it that comes with it, that can only look at the nose in front of their face, except they can't because they've got to put a mask on. So yeah, unlucky to them.
No, yeah. Completely agree. I know but the thing is, they won't be embarrassed about it, but they should be. It is embarrassing that these people like freedom convoy, and you're like, no, there's, as I said, a friend right now who's literally fled a country for freedom. So, my final question on this, right? Because I don't have an answer for it, and I think it's just fucking depressing. What's the solution for this? Because I think we've lost like half the planet, and I don't see there being in my lifetime any way back. I think it's only going to get worse. Are we going into the dark ages? Have we come out of the age of enlightenment and we're going into the dark ages? Like,
I'm not sure whether this is a case of devolution or not, but something that I noticed yesterday was it's funny how a lot of Brexit posts have disappeared. It's funny how a lot of anti-vax posts have disappeared. It's funny how a lot of anti-Scottish independence posts have disappeared. It's funny how a lot of general conspiracy posts have disappeared. The biggest conspiracy, they all started to disappear when Russia got switched off from the internet because of the war in the Ukraine. So if you want a conspiracy to look at, there's one. A lot of files have disappeared. So therefore, a lot of the paranoia has disappeared. And of course, it makes perfect sense. And again, I'm not a political analyst, but I know you've seen there's a lot less conspiracy chat right now. And that's because Russia's been switched off of Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it. So I'm like, there could be a thing. That could be something that, and I'm not blaming Russian people or anything like that. What I am saying is that people need to learn to be able to check their sources better. I don't know if there should be a course in school or a subject in school, like we had, to be able to critique sources better to then help people. Of course, in a utopian world, I could say if everyone had a higher standard of living, then I'd truly believe monsters and looking for monsters under the bed. If we all live in a better society, that's an easy answer, and it's a far harder thing to do. But I have hope that might be. I certainly think that could be a way, and I hope that will be a way. But as I said, the irony, of course, is that the people that are struggling the worst in the world are the ones that don't have time for conspiracy. So I can only maybe suggest that it's schools, if they have a better education, people to critique their sources better. Like we said, learn to actually do their research. I kind of hope also that we're coming to an end of people being as gullible to believe anything. I certainly hope so, because if you look at, as I said, the Creaky Blinders and Fight the Flat Earth and groups like that on YouTube, channels like that on YouTube, more power to people like that who are exposing just how absolutely ridiculous all of these kind of conspiracy theories are. And I hope that that's the way that the world will go. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but speak to people, go out and speak to people, actually question yourself before you start questioning others. And if you can, travel. I'm similar to you. I remember when the internet started. You're a little bit younger than me, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I just mean that in a time frame. That I remember when the internet came along, and I thought, we're going to have all this information at our fingertips. We're going to be flying into Alpha Centauri before we know it. We're going to be the smartest, we're going to be incredible. Unfortunately, I do feel in many ways we've gone backwards because everyone's allowed to now live in their own echo chamber. The nutcase down the street that used to just be the nutcase down the street, the village idiots have managed to create a website where every village idiot can be on villageidiot.com. There's a business, trademark that.
There you go.
But now all these people are allowed to come together, and hopefully there can be a backlash, and I think that there is through some of these YouTube channels. But other than that, try to not let it get to you. I don't know, you're depressing me now.
I know. We've not finished on a high note, but I don't think there was ever going to be. Well, just to tell you, I looked up villageidiot.com and that website is still available. So if you want to start that, then I would grab onto that and buy that.
Villageidiot.com.
Buy that. I swear to God that I thought that would be a website, villageidiot.com. Well, look, let's end it because obviously we could just rant at each other all night, and we've definitely not got anyone listening who is a conspiracy theorist because they've quit a long time ago to go and look up memes. And share memes with each other. And anyone who is listening, send us a message. Let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or are we just two white men shouting at each other? It's been impressive that we've not devolved into peak Scottishness, so people have, I think, can still understand us. And we've spoken for over 2 hours, nearly 2.5 hours, which is definitely what you would expect from two Scottish people in a conversation. And also, peak Scottishness was me asking you a question and telling a whole story before actually getting your answer, which is just what I think every Scottish person does. Well, we'll end it there. Awesome. Richard, let's catch up for a beer soon. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
No problem. Yeah, so much, but I enjoyed it.
Cheers. See you. Thanks for listening to this episode of a Vietnam podcast by 7 Million Bytes. We hope you enjoy hearing our guest stories. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the show and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Thank you so much to Lewis Wright, who made the 7 Million Bytes music and continues to support us in every way. Also to our audio engineer, Luke Digweed, for making sure each episode sounds amazing for you. Also, a big thanks to the 7 Million Bytes community. Thank you so much. It's amazing to get to know you guys. It's amazing to see how much we're growing, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. You can join the community today. The link is in the description of the show. You'll get free tickets to 7 Million Bytes events, episodes before anyone else, and extra special bonus content only for you, and invites to special member-only events. You will also obviously be providing massive support so that we can keep sharing people's stories with you on a Vietnam podcast. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And remember, we have 7 seasons of stories to share with you. So check them out if you haven't already, and we hope you can listen to future episodes too, so you can laugh, connect, and discover. Cheers! I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're like me, you may use your laptop at places where you have to use public Wi-Fi. This opens you up to digital snoopers. It's a massive problem. It can be your internet service provider, or you know who, looking at what you do online, or a cyber criminal trying to steal your bank passwords or credit card info, or even a hacker at the next table trying to steal your sensitive data. These days, it is vital that you keep your data safe. NordVPN keeps all of these snoopers away. It makes your internet activity private, protects you from accessing dangerous websites that are phishing for your data, and lets you enjoy your favorite content securely, even while away from home. And it's easy to use, even I could use it. I've actually been using NordVPN for years now here in Vietnam, and I'm excited to be an affiliate partner with them. I've used NordVPN to watch Netflix, BBC, Disney Plus with ease. And I also know that my information and data are safe from prying eyes, whoever they may be. Join now and you'll get 68% off and 3 months free when you go to my link, nordvpn.com/SMB. Just again, for those hard of hearing, nordvpn.com/SMB. The link is also in the show notes. I know nobody checks them out, but go check that out and you can get the link from wherever you're listening to this podcast. As an affiliate partner, it also means that I will get a small commission when you sign up, but at no extra cost to you. So not only will you be getting a great deal through 7 Million Bytes, you get a great VPN and you'll be supporting 7 Million Bytes podcast. Stay safe online and enjoy the shows you love. Any questions, just let me know. You know how to get in touch with me. And thanks for listening to this show. Cheers.